Okay. All right. Welcome to the continuation of the series on eschatology. This, I think this should be the fifth edition, so is very important. Just pay attention so you understand it. If you understand it, you reduce your confusion about the Christian doctrine, the faith, and what will happen next. You reduce it to the barest minimum, as it were. You will have a firm grip on what you believe and what will happen next. Okay. Daniel's 70th week. You keep hearing this from scholars. All scholars across all Christian denominations agree there will be Daniel's 70th week, or understand what it means to say Daniel's 70th week exists. Now, what is Daniel's 70th week? It is the study of what God said to Daniel that led to an understanding that the last 7 years of this age, as it were, that God has reserved 7 particular years that he will return back to Israel and finish what he started with Israel, and more like punish Israel for their transgressions, finally, and then nip it in the bud. What's the history? Okay. When Daniel and all the other ones who were drawn into Babylonian captivity, remember we talked about that. Daniel went through the book of Jeremiah, through the book of Isaiah, to discover that God said, okay, for 70 years I'll punish you in Babylon. And Daniel went praying, asking God to restore them to the promised land. But God said to Daniel, no, it's not just this 70 years. I'm going to pass Israel through 490 years, which is 70 times 7 will give you 490 years. I will pass Israel through pain and suffering. I will allow Gentile nations that shouldn't have power over them to have power over them and oppress them in what is called the times of the Gentiles. Not just for the 70 years you think you're going to serve in Babylon, but for 490 years. And God said to Daniel, this is how you count the 490 years. From the time the decree is given to restore Jerusalem, which was then broken. You know, when the Babylonians came, they laid siege on Jerusalem. They also pillaged the city, destroyed the city, burnt the gates and stuff like that. Now he said to Daniel, from the time you think you're going back, you're not going back. That the decree is given to restore Jerusalem again unto the Messiah. Until the time that the Messiah is cut off, Bible scholars have come up and agree that 483 years are gone. And when Jesus breathed his last on the cross of Calvary, when he was cut off, Lama Sabatani, and it's finished. God said, now I'm satisfied, at least for a while. I'm going to leave Israel as a nation, dealing with Israel as a nation. I will go over to the Gentile nation and bring in people into this commonwealth that otherwise wouldn't have come in. Since the death of Jesus, God has not been dealing with Israel, particularly as a nation. There's no prophetic voice from Israel since then, have you? None. So he more like left them. They're still in the cooler. Okay? Until when he's done bringing in Gentile nations and the rapture has taken place, he will now return to Israel to say, okay, I have 7 years to finish what we started. Since you people have been messing up all through. I do something, you don't acknowledge it, you behave like others, you do this, you transgress my laws, you do this. Now these last 7 years, let's finish the transgression. Let's put an end to sin. Let's anoint the holy place so you can't sin again. After which Israel will be born again as a nation in one day. That's the purpose of the Daniel's 70th week, or Daniel, which is also called tribulation period. And the tribulation is divided into lesser tribulation and lesser tribulation and the other what is it called? I'll remember exactly what it is called. So it's divided in 2 parts. Okay, so that's the historical basis for the 7 years of tribulation. And there are a few points we need to marshal out from there. So I'll also go through my notes. Okay, now for the scholars, those who would want to get the details. The first is divided into 3 periods, the 490 years that God spoke to Daniel about in Daniel 9:25. The 490 years began with the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah. 3 decrees historically were issued. Cyrus, king of Persia, in Ezra 1:1-4, 3-8, Isaiah 44:28, you find that. 45, 1-4, 46, 11. Cyrus reigned 9 years, then Cambyses, his son, reigned 7 years. In the reign of Cambyses, the work on the temple stopped, Ezra 4:1-4. Then another Darius, remember the Medes and Persia of profane history, reigned 35 years. In the second year of his reign, he reconfirmed the decree. Nothing really happened by Cyrus, and work started again. A lot of time passed, altogether 57 years, before the person who gave the third decree was Artaxerxes, who gave the third decree to Nehemiah to restore Jerusalem unto the Messiah. Nehemiah 2:1-6, 19, Daniel 9:24-26. It took Nehemiah 52 days to restore the walls, but the full restoration took place 49 years after the third decree, which was given about 452 BC. Okay. All right. The second phase consists of 62 sevens of 434 years and began immediately after the 49 years and continued without a break to the time when the Messiah was cut off. Now, remember, we referred to Artaxerxes. That was the Medes and Persians. Babylon gave power. Power was taken by the Medes and Persians from Babylon. Okay? Now, time of 434 years. After that, power went down to Greece. After that, power went down to the Romans, during which time Jesus was born physically. So you get it. All these years, Israel, for 434 years, they were under oppression by Gentile nations, as it were. Okay, so 434 years and began immediately after the 49 years and continued without a break to the time when the Messiah was cut off. Daniel 9:26. So 49 years plus 434 years will make 483 years. From the third decree to the crucifixion of Christ, or the Messiah. Or, if you like to look at it, that will be 69 sevens. That is 69 times 7, 483. Remaining 1 week, which is 7 years, which is called Daniel's 70th week, concerning Israel and Jerusalem, to be fulfilled sometime after the crucifixion of Christ. Okay? Now, we've looked at this third period now that we're waiting for, which is the 7 years of tribulation. That's what we're waiting for. But the truth of the matter is, the rapture must occur first before the tribulation begins. That's doctrinal. That's scriptural. The rapture, the tribulation cannot start until the rapture has taken place. Okay? So, in the period, the third period is the last 7 years of this age, called 7 years of tribulation by Bible scholars. After the 69th week, God ended dealing with Israel as a nation. Matthew 23:37-39, 1 Thessalonians 2:16. They were broken or cut off because of unbelief. And their city, Jerusalem, was destroyed as predicted in Daniel 9:26 and by Jesus in Matthew 21:43, 23:37-39, and Luke 21:20-24, Acts 13:45-49, Romans 11. Jesus, when the disciples were admiring the temple, he said, what are you looking at? No stone will be left on top of each other. Remember? No stone will be left on top of each other. And if you remember what General Titus of Roman Empire did, you will now understand what Jesus talked about. Less than 40-something years after Jesus had gone to heaven, go and Google General Titus of Roman Empire, what he did to Jerusalem. The man, even himself, later knelt down begging God to forgive him for the calamity and the disaster and the pillaging and the destruction he brought upon the Jews. Between AD 70, when he did this, and 1948, there was nothing like Israel as a nation. There was nothing like Israel as a nation. I'll conclude this third period and then I will switch it into another one. Now, we need to understand that clearly. So the 7 years of tribulation will be fulfilled when Israel, partially gathered, will have existed as a nation in possession of Jerusalem for the first 3.5 years, while the Antichrist will possess the same great city in the last 3.5 years. That second period is called the Great Tribulation. Sometimes we forget. Daniel 9:27, Matthew 24:15-22, Revelation 11:1-2. Now, this is what will happen. In 1948, in May 1948, the United Nations helped Israel to become a nation again, waiting for prophecy to be fulfilled. Okay? That's what the United Nations, as far as I'm concerned, that's the greatest job they have done. Probably no other thing. All right, so they helped Israelis come back to Jerusalem, possess that place. Despite all the wars, the Yom Kippur War and all the other wars by all the Arab nations ganging up against Israel, they have survived from 1948 till today. And Israel will keep surviving. Not even Iran will be able to pull them down until the Antichrist signs a 7-year peace treaty. The Antichrist will obey the provisions of that treaty for the first 3.5 years. And in the middle of the week, he will disappoint Israel and move into their temple and ask them to worship him. And that's when the Great Tribulation will also start. Okay? So, I think I will stop it here and roll another tape and then continue the second